This is Dehancer, or I guess more accurately, that was Dehancer. A few months ago, actually, Dehancer reached out to me to see if I would do a review of one of their products, and I kind of ghosted them. I didn't answer right away. I don't know how I forgot about it, but I did. Sorry, guys. But I responded and said, I'm still interested if you guys are. And they were. So in this video, I'm going to be doing a review of Dehancer Pro for DaVinci Resolve. I'm going to be talking about what Dehancer actually is and what it does. I'm going to be sharing how I've been using Dehancer, and hopefully you can see how you could use Dehancer for yourself. And lastly, I'm going to be taking Dehancer and putting it up against one of my favorite film emulation plugins to date, which is VideoVillage's Filmbox. After using the plugin for about a month, I feel like I have most of my thoughts together. So let's dive in and talk about what Dehancer actually is. Dehancer is a super robust plugin. There are a ton of different tools and things that are happening inside to make your digital images really look like they were shot on film. Dehancer has profiled over 60 different types of film. It's not just an overlay, it's not just a LUT. There are a lot of different things going on. So let's talk about each of these just so you can better understand how Dehancer actually works. Film Developer is one of those tools that I don't really use very much. If you find that your camera or color space is not something that Dehancer offers, Film Developer can be an interesting tool to play around with, I suppose. I don't use it very much, but that's what it does. Film compression is one of my favorite parts about Dehancer. Film has a much greater dynamic range when it comes to the highlights. So what it does is it kind of creates this soft roll-off look that you can dial in to your preference. I have not been able to really emulate this look with any other kind of tool, so this one is really great. Expand is where you can basically just set your black and your white points as you kind of create a look in Dehancer. It's important to know about this because as you add different tools, the colors and the contrast are going to change dramatically. Print film allows you to take your image and print it onto a final medium for display. So you've got a couple options in here. You can convert it to Cineon Film Log for further grading or putting your own film look LUTs on it. You can put it into Fujifilm's 3513, Kodak's 2383, or you can throw it onto the Kodak Endura Glossy paper. All of these are just different mediums that affect the colors and the saturation and the contrast in a way that's very, very pleasing and also very familiar with a lot of audiences. Color Head allows you to adjust the look of your image in a more creative way. I don't ever use it. I just don't find it very helpful for me in my workflow. Next, we have a trio of some really, really great tools. We have Film Grain, Halation, and Bloom. Dehancer's Film Grain is unique because it rebuilds your whole image from grain. No idea how they do that. I have no idea how it doesn't melt my computer if it's doing that for every frame. Halation is that red or yellow glow in the highlights of a film image. You've probably seen it nowadays if you are in the filmmaker space or world, or you have a pair of eyes. Everybody is using Halation. It really is that, like, I'm going for a film look thing. And the last one of this little trio here is Bloom. I really like the softness that it creates around the highlights, but leaves the rest of the image pretty sharp. I don't know. It's a really cool thing to utilize and to have, and I oftentimes will keep this one on. We've got Film Damage, Film Breath, and Gate Weave. Film Damage, you could probably figure out what that is, but you can add dust, dirt, grime, hair, nasty stuff to your image to make it look more like a real piece of film. Film Breath and Gate Weave just basically add movement. They're very intensive on the computer to like simulate that jiggle, I guess, to the image. It's very cool, don't get me wrong. I don't find that I often need it too much. Overscan is an overscan of the image. It gives you the option to add back in the scanned borders of a film negative. So it gives you different aspect ratios. It gives you different types of film. It's very, very cool. I just don't use it all the time. And lastly is Vignette not much to talk about. It gives you an ability to add a vignette look to your image. I usually keep this on. It's nice to have, you know, I could do it just as easily with a mask in Resolve, but why not just use Dehancer if I've got it right? So all of that is great to know, but it's better to see it in action. So let's jump into DaVinci Resolve and I'll quickly show you how you can use Dehancer and how I have been using Dehancer for myself for the past month. So first I started with this node tree. I had copied this from Dehancer's actual recommendations for node trees. There's nothing special about them yet. They just have labels on them so you kind of know what they're doing. I'm just gonna jump over to a power grade that I've made. I'm gonna just grab this one here and drag it onto the Dehancer tab. Okay, so I've disabled everything and closed all of the different windows. There's just so many things to go through. We're gonna fly through this, honestly. I'm just gonna sort of walk you through what I think looks really good about this preset. I'll also upload this to my website. So if you have Dehancer or you buy Dehancer, you know, you can start with this if you want to. So let's start with the input here. We just need to input what this camera is. So I know that it was shot on the Alexa Mini. So I'm gonna click Arri, I'm gonna click Alexa Mini, and I know that it's in log C. So let's open up the film page here. This one is pretty important. This allows you to select a negative profile to put onto your image. So if we hit enable here, you'll see immediately the change that it just made. So let's skip over Film Developer because I don't use it. We'll jump onto film compression and just watch the highlights here when I turn this on. You can see that it brings down the highlight level. So you'll want to dial this in maybe per scene or shot depending on what you're color grading. So as per Dehancer's recommendation, we're going to jump over expand for now because we'll come back to that to dial in our contrast. So we'll hit the print film. I love using the Kodak 2383 print film. It looks so good. I love the colors that I get from it. Here are some of the settings that I feel like work pretty well, and here's what it looks like applied. This is why it's important to now go to the expand tab and then turn this on, because it allows you to adjust, you know, what the contrast of different parts of the image are going to look like. Dehancer just tends to come on rather strong, but you know, with a little bit of tweaking and pushing and pulling, you can get it to a place that looks pretty good. I skip over color head because I don't use it. Film grain, I love using the 65 millimeter 250. You can really see the grain show up just immediately when I turn it on. You can just see all of that grain up in there in the highlights and just everywhere. It's a pretty easy setting to dial in. Halation here, I have mine set to the 35, Super 35 at 75%. 75% can sometimes be a little bit much depending on how bright the scene is, so you can just, of course, bring that down. So for bloom, I like to use the 65, 70 millimeter bloom. Around 43, 45% creates a very subtle bloom look. So the last tool that I use is vignette. So really you can just turn this on and you can see it creates a pretty strong vignette around the image. And it has a mask mode that allows you to see where it's going to affect the image. Once you have all of the settings that you like halation, film grain, and maybe your contrast level set, it's fun to go back in then and change your film look. There are just a ton of different options, and to be honest, it's a little overwhelming. I've played with every single one of these film profiles, and I found these films to be some of the ones that I like the most. The rest are interesting. You know, maybe you like them more than some of the ones that I just had up on the screen. Now what we're gonna do is take a few of these shots and compare it to one of my favorite film emulation plugins right now, which is Filmbox. So I'll be real, when Dehancer first hit me up, one of the reasons why I did not immediately get back to them was because I was already pretty satisfied with the results that I was getting using Filmbox's film emulation. But one of the things that actually changed my mind about wanting to give Dehancer a shot was just using their iPhone app to color grade some of the photos that I was taking on my phone. I really had a good time using some of the different film emulations and, you know, throwing videos too, to just be able to do that and post that to Instagram on like a story or whatever. I was like, okay, I gotta give Dehancer a try. Maybe it's better than Filmbox. Maybe I've been missing out. So to compare these two plugins, I'll just first show you some images and I'll allow you to sort of choose which ones you like, and then I'll reveal which ones are which, and we'll talk about the differences between the two. Another point that I'm going to keep is I'm just going to leave the settings as they are straight out of the box. I'm not going to change a single setting. I'm just going to leave it as is, and I'll let you decide which one you like a little bit more. So if you found yourself throughout that liking option A, that would be Dehancer. So that means option B was Filmbox. Personally, I think Filmbox 4 out of 4 crushes Dehancer when it comes to Vision 3 emulation. The only way that I was able to get good results with the Vision 3 films with Dehancer was turning off the negative emulation profile for the films. I found that if I turned that off and I just used 2383 in the print film section, it looked pretty good, but disappointingly, it was just not better than the results I was getting with Filmbox. I think overall, my favorite parts about Dehancer were the tools that it had. I loved the film compression. Using the film compression is like a game-changing level of, plugin for me. Like, it's so good. I love the way that it makes the highlights look. I love the film grain and I love the bloom effect. The vignetting tool is pretty cool. Another thing that I really liked about Dehancer was the performance. I feel like the performance of Dehancer, it's really good. Like, it's really strong, and they're like consistently bringing firmware updates and updates to the plugin that make it run better. Another thing I love is the community around Dehancer. I feel like there's a super strong YouTube community when it comes to Dehancer. I feel like the team at Dehancer is really invested in, making the best plugin that they can and listening to people doing reviews like this. They're trying to do their research and make a plugin. I think that's really cool, and they're very open about, trying to make a plugin that is accessible for people that aren't necessarily colorists. They're not necessarily beginners. They're somewhere right in the middle of, that little scale there. So with the pros, naturally, there are some cons. First, I think there was just a lot of confusion. I never really knew if the plugin was doing something wrong or if I was doing something wrong. It was just a lot of guesswork. Oftentimes I had to jump back to the website and figure out what a certain thing did or how I was supposed to be using something. It always felt like there was this shortfall of, am I doing this right? It just felt a little confusing creatively. Secondly, I think their philosophy of, prioritizing accuracy just naturally made them prioritize like actuality a little bit less. What I mean by that is, the results that you actually get from these accurate film scans, like, are they the best place to start with a color grade? After shooting on so many different types of film and shooting probably more rolls of Portra 400 than I care to admit, no matter what the actual film stock looks like, I am usually going to correct the image in a way that suits my personal taste. So, is starting from the most like accurate version of a film stock the most important thing? I don't think so. I think a results-driven philosophy is a little bit more effective, especially when it comes to a tool that's supposed to allow you to make better creative decisions. So I always think about that experience of, white balancing and correcting out some of these weird things that happen when you shoot film, and recognize that that's my own personal opinion, and that I think I would rather appreciate something that gives me an immediately good or close to good result that I can sort of build off of and not feel like I have to really work to make it work. Third, I was just disappointed by the Vision3 films. Again, one of the reasons I got Dehancer in the first place was to see if I was missing out on something that Filmbox wasn't giving me. Just from the comparison section of this video, I never really felt like the looks that I was getting from Dehancer were right. Like, I didn't really like those. So that was a big wave of disappointment for me with this plugin. And lastly, I just feel like the experience overall, the user experience in Dehancer is just a lower score for me. It wasn't very inspiring, and that was a little disappointing. So those are my thoughts in terms of some cons when it comes to Dehancer. So I think if you have creativity, you're willing to put in a little bit of work to make this plugin look good, I think Dehancer is an easy choice. It's an easy no-brainer. It has amazing value when it comes to some of the tools that it offers, like the halation, the bloom, the grain, the compression. Those kinds of tools are unmatched in my opinion. I'm so glad that Dehancer reached out for me to do this review. If you do decide that you want to pick up Dehancer for yourself to try out some of these different tools for your own projects, I have a 10% off discount code, mahartman. Just drop that in the discount code box at checkout for 10% off. I hope you enjoyed this video, but I really hope that you learned something more about film emulation, about Dehancer, about color grading, and how to make your looks look like film. If you're looking for more content like this related to filmmaking, film photography, home office, studio stuff, feel free to hit the subscribe button for more content down the road. But until then, I'll see you guys in the next one.